Hello, my name is Roy Wood, and I'm the Chief of Interpretation at Katmai National Park and Preserve. And this is Mike Fitz. He's the Park Ranger here at Katmai, and we both want to welcome you to our latest Ranger Chat. This is the last one that we're going to be doing from Brooks Camp, so it's kind of special for us. And when I say from Brooks Camp, it means this year. We intend to do these things next year as well, but we're packing up and heading out of here today. In fact, for the last couple of days, Mike and I and the other Rangers here have been packing up our cabins and sending loads of our personal belongings back into King Salmon, which is where many of us spend the winter. Not all of us. Some of the people will continue on to other national parks or take a much-needed vacation during the winter. And even though this is our last time out here at Brooks Camp, we do intend to have chats throughout the winter. We'll be doing a chat on Wednesday from King Salmon someplace. We haven't figured out where we're going to do that, but that'll be another one of the Disney nature chats that they're doing, the Wildlife Wednesdays. And I'm not sure what the subject of that one will be. We haven't quite figured that out yet, but we'll be doing that on Wednesday. And then throughout the winter, we intend to do these chats periodically. We won't do them as much like in November or December or January, because there's, frankly, not a lot going on in a bear's life other than sleeping. So we really can't update you on very much. But we intend to stay in touch and do a number of these chats as the winter progresses.
And I think we're also planning on just being available in the comment section of explore.org for the bear cams as well, too, to answer many questions as well. So I try to make myself available a couple times a week at least to do that. So look for that as well. And
before we jump into the questions that have come in, just a couple of things to mention. There have been some problems with the Discuss message board today, so it's possible that we may lose that ability to chat with you again. If that happens and you've got an account on Twitter or Facebook, you can communicate with explore.org that way and get your questions to us. If we find out that the questions stop feeding in, we might wrap it up a little bit early, but we'll just let you be prepared for that. And I'm sure that those of you that are on the cams all the time have noticed this morning that things were just a little bit flaky with the chat area. So we just wanted to get that on the table first before we started talking a little bit about camp. Now, we've been talking about closing camp for a number of days now, and we did the chat over the weekend as you saw us pulling the underwater camera out, and we've talked about removing the bridge and how everything gets winterized here. We didn't really talk about maybe why we do it, what appears to perhaps be so early. If you look today, this is a beautiful day, and it's hard to imagine that we'd be thinking that we needed to shut down camp and get out of here. And without going into all the nitty-gritty details of how our camp is put together and how our systems really aren't winterized, that's part of it, making sure that we don't freeze our water lines and damage the equipment out here. But another really important part that we can't ever forget is that this time of the year is incredibly important for the bears. It's right before they're going into their dens. It's a period known as hyperphagia, which means, hyper eating, lots of eating. And that's what you're seeing on the cams, is these bears spending almost all of their time looking around, trying to find that last salmon or that last cluster of dead or dying salmon so that they can feed on them and get good and fat for their winter hibernation. So a number of years ago, it was determined that Brooks Camp would close in order to vacate the area and allow the bears to spill back into the areas where we are and have less disturbance by human beings. And so that's a really big reason why the camp shuts down when it does. Because you're going to see a lot of bears still fishing the lower river and maybe even up at the falls for the next couple of weeks. Maybe even more bears than you're seeing now. But that's why camp closes early, as we want to make sure that the bears have that last access to the fish that they need before going into their dens.
And we may even have a bear walk by us during this chat here, because the beach is a pretty popular travel corridor for them. And I should also mention too that, if you're a bear, you can sometimes afford to make mistakes in the beginning of the summer. Maybe you go to a stream where there's not a lot of salmon because you have all this extra time maybe to catch up. But right now they can't afford to make mistakes. So like Roy was saying, this is really the most critical time of the year for these animals. And it's really important that they have free access to the food resources they need to survive.
Lots of people, in July are asking us about, are you worried about that bear or that bear because they look skinny? And in July, there's always some concern when you have a skinny bear, but that we know that if they can get through July and have some access to the fish, that September can really make or break it for them, and they can really catch up if they got behind. So now if you ask us, are you concerned about that really skinny bear? Now we would be really concerned about a bear that was super thin right now, because it may not have enough to get through hibernation. And this is one of the questions we were talking earlier about. Did we miss some questions? Somebody said, asking a question yesterday that we never got to. Do they ever die in their dens of starvation? And, we're not in the dens watching them, but I know that I have visited caves before with bears that had used these, like in Europe, where bears had used caves for denning, and there are dead bears in the cave. So yes, it does happen. But as far as I know, none of us have ever found a dead bear in one of our dens around here. So that, I can't say for sure that our bears have died that way, but it's not outside the realm of possibility.
Certainly, and when they come out of the den too, they're not really, I guess, out of deep water at that point. They still are facing a lot of challenges in the springtime. Springtime is one of the highest times of mortality for bears because there's virtually nothing to eat. So they're not only fattening up at this time of the year to survive the winter, but also the spring as well too. They're really waiting, and they're not going to have much nutritious food until June of next year. So they're really fattening up for a tremendous period of time, a tremendous period of starvation, something that I don't think Roy and I can ever imagine. I'm so used to eating regular meals that after, after a few hours, I'm like, oh, well, I got to get something to eat. But, the bears...
It's schedule for us, like we eat because we know it's 5:30, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whatever. Sometimes even before we're truly hungry. The bears, however, may go days without getting anything in the spring. Days, weeks even, or just some mildly nutritious grass or sedge to eat. So that's what's going on right now. This hyperphagia is driving virtually every aspect of their lives. They're foraging or they're sleeping, and if they manage to get their bellies full and it's a nice enough day, that's when we've been seeing some of the play fighting. But then you'll notice that those playing sessions break up and they go right back to feeding again almost all the time. So incredibly important, and it drives a lot of their behavior right now, and it leads sometimes to some other behaviors that at least that we've seen around here, at least one case we know of over the weekend, and that is sometimes it can drive them to to be aggressive towards one another. A year ago we had 2 subadult bears that we know were killed by bears. We're not sure which bears were killed and which bears did the killing in both cases, but we know that happened. One of them we got to watch on the webcam with Lurch and the cache that he took over from Bear 469. But we also often lose cubs this time of the year, and that's something that happened over the weekend. We talked about this briefly on Saturday at our sort of informal chat we were doing. And for those of you that missed that, what happened was we received a phone call or a radio call a little bit before 9 on Friday. It was raining, pretty nasty weather, and the call was that one of the other employees up at the other end of our camp at a place called Lake Brooks had witnessed some interaction with a cub out on the lake. It was dark, it wasn't really clear, but there was a cub that was dying. So a bunch of us hopped in vehicles and went up there to investigate, and what we did observe was a cub of the year that was partially in the water, bleeding, mortally wounded. It was pretty clear to all of us that there was no chance that this bear was going to make it, and we secured the area, made sure all the employees knew not to go into the area, and then we left it. And that was a difficult thing to do because none of us want to see any animal suffer, and if you've worked here for a while, you do get quite fond of the bears. And we didn't really know this as an individual bear, but still, adorable little cub, definitely not going to make it. It was a hard thing to see. And by morning, it had died, and he was collected and taken to King Salmon, where biologists and investigators yesterday examined his body. They wanted to make sure that the wounds were consistent with what we assumed it was, which was an adult bear attack on this cub. And that's what they found when they did the investigation. It had bite marks on it, and appears, I had said that it was unable to move its hindquarters on Saturday, and it appears that the spinal cord was snapped, probably during some vigorous shaking. It was not bitten by, I got to turn my phone off so you don't hear my...
But one thing that really sort of amazed me about that cub is it was still trying.
Yeah.
I mean, it was up. I mean, it had a severed spine, but it was sitting upright. It was trying to move. I mean, this thing was not giving up. So we looked at it like Roy said, and it looked mortally wounded to us, but the thing was still trying to persevere. It was still trying to pull through it, and it's kind of amazing considering the extent of the injuries that it actually had.
Yeah, so as I said, the injuries were consistent with an adult bear biting it at least one time, probably shaking it. What was kind of bizarre about it, though, is that it didn't stay and finish and eat the bear, kill the bear and then eat it. And that's the only time we know of out here where that's occurred. And again, just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but that was a bit unusual that during this time of hyperphagia that it would kill it and not eat it. Why it didn't finish it, who knows? It may be that the employee turned on the light to see what the ruckus was outside and that spooked the bear, or shining a flashlight on it, or another bear came by and it decided or perhaps the mother decided to defend it. We don't really know what happened and why it wasn't consumed, which would be typically the case this time of the year. But we wanted to share that with you. We said as soon as we found out something, we would pass that on, and that sort of then leads into the other thing that we observed last night when we were taking the bridge down, and that was that sow with 2 cubs that appeared down at the lower river while I was in the water and Mike was on the bridge taking things apart.
We were kind of, sorry to interrupt, we were kind of like speculating about maybe which bear had lost the cub over the weekend, and we thought it was, such and such bear, and then just yesterday we see a bear coming down to the bridge when Roy and I were down there, and that bear looked a lot like number 402 to me. I would say I'm 95% confident that was her, but she only had 2 cubs instead of her regular 3. So we don't really know if she lost the cub in a separate incident or the cub that we happened to find was 402's. We're just not quite sure at this point.
Right. My take on it is that the cub that was in the river appeared to be lighter than 402's cubs, or the cub that was in the lake, the one that ended up dying, appeared to be lighter than hers. But it was dark. The background was dark, so in comparison to the background, it was lighter. So I suppose they took some DNA samples. If we ever get around to running the DNA on it, we could determine if it was 402 or not, because I think 402 was probably sampled back in 2007,
I believe
2008.
she was, yeah.
So we might be able to find out who it is, but it's not going to happen in the next few days. It might not happen until sometime over winter. So keep that on the back burner, and we might revisit that later. At this point, we do not know if 402 was the mother of the dead cub, or if 402 lost a cub in another incident, and if that was 402 last night. So yesterday, if you watched the afternoon chat, you met Leslie, one of our bear biologists. She'll be out watching the bears over the next couple of weeks, and we will be checking in with her to make sure that we get the latest info from her. And if she sees 402 with 3 cubs later, then mystery somewhat solved.
But yeah, I mean, when you're watching the cams, of course, we love to watch the cubs. I mean, they're so playful. They have a lot of energy, but they do face a tremendous amount of risk during their young lives. And most litters, or I shouldn't say most, but many litters here in Katmai are lost completely. So, when you happen to see a mother lose just 1 cub, she still is trying to raise those others, but there are many, many instances where the whole entire litter happens to be lost. And that happened with 402 with her last litter as well. In 2011, she had three spring cubs, and by the end of the summer, she didn't have any. So it's kind of par for the course for these animals. They're really tough animals, but they have to be, because they lead really tough lives.
Yep. So that was actually question number 2 that came in, but I think we were able to segue into that with the introduction. We wanted to talk about some of the happenings over the weekend. A question I did skip over was, how much do you guess the bears weigh that are up roaming the falls right now, like the big males?
Well, some of them are real giants. I'd estimate like a number 747. We haven't seen too much of him recently. I don't know if you've seen him.
I haven't seen him lately, no.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, he was around back in the beginning of September, and in July, we were estimating that he weighed over 1,000 pounds.
Well, and the guys that had been doing the work on the Kodiak bears said easily 1,200 for him.
So
because they had been radio collaring and tranquilizing Kodiak bears just the week before.
So he's a real monster, and he's 1,200 pounds minimum, maybe probably more by now.
If his skin will stretch that much. He looked like he was about to pop.
So he's one of those bears where the belly is almost hanging on the ground right now. Another bear that's probably about that big would be 814 Lurch. Other bears like Otis. Otis is a big guy, but he's not nearly as big as 814 or 747. So to give you an, I think I've used this statistic before in some of our chats, but it's worth, I think, repeating, is that the average midsummer weight for an adult male here in Katmai is 600 to 900 pounds. So that's a midsummer weight.
Average.
So, average. So let's say July. So you're going to have bears like 747 that are above that scale. They're giants. And then you're going to have maybe some smaller bears. But at this time of the year, I think most of those bears are going to be pushing the upper ends of that limit at minimum.
Yep.
And the cub that we collected the other day, the one that happened to die, we weighed it, and that weighed 63 and a half pounds. And that was something that was born 9 months ago. So just they have a tremendous rate of growth.
Yep. So since we're talking about male bears up at the falls, they're wondering if Scaredy Bear has been seen this fall.
I haven't seen him. I
haven't either. He was seen in July a lot, of course, but not in September. And let's see. Well, there's a cub question here. Let me go ahead and jump back to the cub question. And that question is, why didn't we put the suffering cub down? And the reason we didn't is because part of why national parks were created was to preserve the natural processes contained within them. That is to conserve the clean water, the survival, the death of plants and animals, the geologic features. I mean, everything about it, to preserve it as much as possible in a way that does not reflect human intervention. If we were trying to raise as many bears as possible, that would not be a good way of doing it. You would want to save every bear. You would want to, if you saw a bear with an infection, you'd want to inject it with antibiotics. You'd want to take them to the veterinarians all the time, get their teeth cleaned, do all the things that you do with your pet. If that was solely the purpose, if it were a bear farm, if you will, then that would be something that you would want to do. Take care of them all the time, and then when one of your herd was injured or sick, then you would want to go in and do that. But as Mike said just a moment ago, bears are incredibly resilient. And it was pretty clear to all of us that this bear wasn't going to make it, but there have been other bears that people have also asked, why don't you kill that bear? It would be the humane thing to do, whether it be 469 or Backpack, one of the favorite bears around here. Those bears look like they did not have much of a chance at survival. And so had we gone with what may have been public consensus at the time that was the humane thing to do, we wouldn't have bear 469 around right now. We would have killed it off in July. We wouldn't have Backpack around because we would have killed him in 2007. And now he's one of the males moving into the falls with this great story of how bears can overcome adversity and by their strength and by their perseverance. So I know that's not going to appease everybody. And trust me, when I was standing up there on Friday night looking at that bear, I wanted to figure out something that I could do to help it. And I know, we all felt that way to some degree, but we know also, deep in our hearts and also in our minds that the Park Service mission isn't just to keep everything alive that's in the park. It's to maintain that integrity of the ecosystem. And unfortunately, that does mean that sometimes, you've got to let nature take its course, even when it's kind of ugly to observe. So I hope I didn't ramble too long on that, but that's something that I think all of us feel very strongly about. Yeah,
we really here in Katmai National Park and throughout the national park system are working to preserve not only the pleasant things that we like to enjoy about nature, but the hard things about nature too. So you try to remind yourself of that, and the next time you happen to see a bear, tear into a live salmon, because they're not being merciful with that, and that salmon's still alive. They're ripping the skin off of it, they're biting into it, and we don't really hear any sympathy for the fish. Although it must not be a pleasant experience, obviously, for those animals.
We were wondering about that even just this morning. Like, there isn't a lot of sympathy for salmon getting killed by the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands in the summer. And where is that line? What makes the salmon less sympathetic than other animals? It's a deeper philosophical question that, of course, we're not going to get to today. But think about that amongst yourselves. Like, is it because salmon don't have fur?
Or they don't scream?
Because they don't scream? What is it about it? And we're not sure. All of us have talked about that at some point, just that it's an interesting thing that I think all of us humans have, where that animal isn't close enough to us that it gets the same sympathy that the cute, adorable, fluffy things get. So we're getting behind on questions here. If it's warm enough and there was plenty of food, would bears still hibernate? that's a great hypothetical question. Around here, there isn't enough food and it's plenty cold, so they're going to hibernate. But in places in the southern parts of the United States where it doesn't get cold and where there is food year round, you will find that black bears, they don't have brown bears in the southern United States, but black bears do not always hibernate. If there's plenty of food around and it's not cold, they will wander about and feed. And what I keep wondering is, does that brown bear at the San Diego Zoo hibernate? Because, you know, best climate in the U.S. in San Diego, and he's sitting there with food being trucked into him every day. And I don't know if he hibernates or not. I've never seen him past November.
And well, I wouldn't know the answer to that either. But male polar bears are not really known to hibernate.
Yep.
You know, female polar bears will, and she'll go into a den and she'll give birth in a den. But male polar bears, they're out and about in the fiercest winter weather hunting out on the ice pack.
So along the same lines as that one, if the winter is unusually mild, do the bears ever come out of their dens for a few days?
Occasionally, you know, if there's a warm spell, they may, you know, get aroused for whatever reason, come out of their dens. But they're really sort of in a hibernating state at that period of time. So they're not coming out of the den and then they're going to go search for food for a few days. They're basically, their metabolism is still fairly low, even if they're up and moving around. So they're probably just going to go right back into the den. But that's been documented to happen. If there's a warm spell, a bear might come out of the den for just a little bit.
So there's the next question is, if a bear came our direction during this video chat, what would we do? Well, that's why we're looking around all the time. We find it difficult to just continue to make eye contact with a human being standing in front of us when we're out in Katmai, because we're always looking around for another bear, and we have to keep remembering not to stare into the lens the whole time and look back and forth. It's kind of second nature for us. So what would happen is, most likely we would see it either way down the beach this way or way down the beach that way, far enough that we could maybe make a graceful exit, where we could say, well, folks, we've got a bear coming this way. We're going to pick the camera up and we're going to move up toward the visitor center, which is just about 20 yards behind the camera right now. We would go up there into the relative safety of that structure. It's possible that a bear could come from right over here on a trail that we don't have good visibility down, or right over here on another trail that we don't have very good visibility on. But they're moving most of the time pretty slow this time of the year. There's a good chance we would see it with plenty of time to go pick up the camera and move out of its way. They're very, very intent on getting fish. You know, that's the primary thing right now. They are not likely to be interested in us other than as a curiosity. What are these guys doing standing down there?
But it's important to get out of a bear's line of travel if you see it coming along. There are certainly times where you want to stand your ground if you were surprised by a bear. But if we're seeing a bear walk down the beach here, there's no reason for us to stand our ground, because that bear is maybe is going to turn up into the woods behind the camera right now. So and then that will go into the area of the camp near the buildings where there could be more people, for instance. So we don't want to, you know, maybe have them get in close contact with people or buildings if it's not necessary. So moving out of a bear's line of travel in many instances is really important, and just giving them the space to go about their business as they need to.
And if you're picking up any of that noise, I'm not sure if you can hear it, but there's camp is pretty busy today with employees starting to drain the water lines. We have to drain them, then we have to pump air through them to really make sure we blast out all the water. They're putting shutters on the visitor center, so there's a lot of vehicular traffic going on right now. And you know, as I've said now probably 3 times during this, we're closing up camp, and as soon as this chat is over, Mike and I are hopping on the plane and flying out of here for the rest of the season.
Unfortunately.
Yeah,
I'd stay much longer if I could, even though it's getting kind of chilly. It may not seem like it looks chilly if you're watching on the cam, but it's in the mid-40s right now. So if clouds happen to roll in and you know, we would get some drizzle at this point in time, it would be quite a damp day and cold day. But right now it's extremely pleasant, so it's very hard to leave when it's like this.
So this isn't a question, but people are thinking about, you know, why is it that no one pities the salmon? And somebody said, I had a tremendous amount of trouble watching the painful deaths of fish when I first started watching the cams. So I'm with you on that. It looks painful. It looks horrible.
you just watch. I mean, you watch the fish. You watch how a bear just pins it down, and again, showing no mercy, just bites into it and just peels the skin back. I mean, obviously that animal is not really you know, having a pain-free death in any way. So that, yeah, it's tough for me to watch too. But we do have people, you know, up at the falls in July that, you know, they will cheer when they see salmon make that leap. So we know that people do empathize with salmon, but of course it's not as much as what we with a mammal, obviously.
So, again, fourth time we're closing up. We're moving out of here. We end up back in king salmon, both of us, and that leads into the question of then what are we doing? Like, what are our vacation plans? Well, I don't know what all my vacation plans are. I'll do a little bit of hibernating like the bears. I'll spend some time in king salmon, just sort of hunkered down, maybe looking through my photos. Beyond that, I won't hibernate the whole winter. I will migrate, and I always try to go someplace nice and warm and sunny in the wintertime. It might be Mexico, might be Central America, might be Florida, might be the desert. I don't know yet, but someplace south where I can enjoy a nice bug and large land-based predator-free environment for just a little while. As much as we love the bears, it is nice to go for a walk, say, in the desert and not have to worry about.
If you didn't hear me before, we had some technical difficulties there. Our Wi-Fi signal got disconnected for just a little bit, so we apologize for that. But we're back now, it seems like.
And it's part of camp shutdown. They were in the visitor center starting to turn things off in there and didn't realize, because we're a little bit farther away from them, that when they shut the power off to that building, they killed the power to our chat. So really apologize for that, but it just underscores again how close we are to having camp closed up and out of here. I mean, they are ready to shut everything down on the Brooks camp side of things.
And I think we were kind of in the middle of vacation talk, but yeah, just to boil that down to its essence, you know, we try to visit family and friends. We try to take a fun trip, you know, each and every year. So we'll be moving out of King Salmon just for vacations, but we'll be there almost all winter.
And now I can't remember if we were talking about the subadults before or after vacation.
It was after vacation. So I think they may have missed the
They missed all the subadult talk.
So
the question was how quickly subadults must learn to fish and compete. It seems like a pretty dicey time for them this time of the year.
And with the subadult bears, they definitely have to learn where to fish. I mean, practice. It takes a lot of practice to fish at certain spots, especially up at Brooks Falls in July. At this time of the year, the salmon are just dispersed throughout the river. They're dead and they're dying. They're just dropping to the bottom of the stream where the current loses its energy. So it really doesn't take a lot of skill to find fish right now. In fact, I can go out into the river and I can pick up dead fish pretty easily. It's not.
What you saw him do a week ago on the chat, 2 weeks ago.
So it's not too difficult. But in July, it takes a lot of skill to fish certain places at Brooks Falls. Some bears are good at fishing everywhere. They're more generalists. Some bears are more specialized in their fishing techniques. One bear that's more of a generalist and was very good at catching fish when he was a subadult is number 218, who's nicknamed Ugly. And as a subadult bear, he was really good at catching fish. Now he can fish practically anywhere up at Brooks Falls, and he's actually big enough to dominate many of the best fishing spots up at Brooks Falls too. So that makes a big difference as well. If you're a smaller bear, maybe even if you're an adult female, you're not going to be able to fish all of the preferred spots up at Brooks Falls because there's probably going to be a bigger male sitting there trying to push you out of the way or keeping you from getting access to that spot. So if you are subadult, yeah, definitely you got to learn how to fish in certain places. Not all bears learn to fish on top of the falls, at the lip of the falls. Sometimes you'll see younger bears up there, and I think both of Roy and I have seen that where a younger bear will go to the top of the falls when there's a space available and fish will be jumping, and sometimes the fish will hit them in the face or in the chest and they just miss them.
Because they're often too busy looking over their shoulders for the large males to come and take back the spot.
So yeah, it definitely takes practice to perfect for sure.
Okay, next question is kind of a hypothetical one. It's a very interesting one, but I don't know the answer to it. And that is, if a female bear doesn't hibernate, presumably, you know, a zoo bear or a bear in the south, like a black bear or something, do they still have delayed implantation? I mean, biologically, they're capable of it, but, you know, I don't know what triggers it. If it's, you know?
I don't, but I know with other mammals that have delayed implantation, like weasels and pinnipeds, like seals, sea lions, stuff like that, they have delayed implantation too.
It's around food abundance for them.
Yeah, and they don't hibernate, of course, and it's associated, I think, maybe more with food abundance.
Yeah.
So
that's a really good question that I don't I don't know the answer to, and I don't know that Troy, the chief of natural resources from the park, would know the answer off the top of his head either, but we can look into that one and maybe post the answer to that question online later.
And I think with some of those processes, like the delayed implantation, definitely there's physiological mechanisms that maybe trigger it, but a lot of those things are genetically controlled too. I mean, the animal doesn't really have a choice. Like,
right.
You know, humans don't really have a choice in the way our pregnancies really proceed. And I don't think bears really would have a choice either, even if they are the most well-fed bear on Earth.
Right. Yeah, good question though, and we'll definitely see if we can track down the answer to that one. It may be a difficult one to figure out here at Brooks Camp, but when we have full access to the internet and we can pick up the phone and call people, we can maybe follow that trail around and see what we can find. So another good question here. What's the hardest part of your job, Mike?
Hardest part of my job?
Think on your feet.
I think a lot of times trying to give people a good experience but protect the resources at the same time can be difficult, especially when you see people sort of push the boundaries. I think those are always, for me, some of the more challenging contacts that I actually have is when you see someone maybe behaving inappropriately, but you want to make them understand why that behavior is inappropriate. And in many cases, they disagree with you 100%. And people are welcome to disagree, but I'm still going to try to maybe have a conversation with that person and to let them at least understand why we have certain regulations in place, and maybe why that behavior was improper or unsafe or whatever it happens to be. So I think that's the most difficult part of my job, and I think it always takes a lot of careful thought with how you're going to phrase things to de-escalate situations where maybe you're not making a person angry, but you're calming them down, maybe just trying to have a good conversation with them about what's going on, or if they have a complaint and they're coming to you like that. I think those are sometimes the most difficult parts of my job.
And I would agree too that people that are doing things either, well, I shouldn't say unintentionally, but intentionally that are going to result in potential harm to the park, and then they're resistant to change. It's trying to explain to them why, and you can't go in and force someone to change their mind, but you can try to help them see the light and see that why these regulations are in place or why these policies are in place, and those can be really difficult interactions with people. So that's the difficult part about our jobs. For me, the best part about it, or the part I enjoy the most, other than just being out myself and getting to enjoy a beautiful day like this and watching bears. I mean, you can't see it, but there was a bear over at the mouth of the river, and that is, I really like this privilege I have of being able to experience it through the eyes of the people that are visiting the park too. And that occurred to me when I was very young working at Grand Canyon. I saw it the first time in my life when I went to work there, and it was amazing. And after a few days, you don't get jaded, but it's your yard. It's sort of your backyard. You're used to it, and you still go out and enjoy it and all. But boy, you can get excited about it again when someone else comes up and you get to see how excited they were at seeing the Grand Canyon for the first time, or how excited here people are at seeing their first bear or their first bear catching a salmon at the falls. And so that's just really exciting for me, that it just never gets old, because every day there's a new crop of visitors coming in that get to watch it with me, and they allow me in to share that experience with them. I know last night a bunch of people were watching sunset on the cam that was set up in my cabin, and that was so much more fun for me to know that there were about 100 people watching sunset with me that were very excited about how beautiful that was last night.
It's quite refreshing to see, I think, people's reactions to some of the things that we are fortunate enough to see almost every day. And when a plane comes in and there's a bear sleeping on the beach, a couple 100 yards away, those people will get off the plane and they're so excited. And I might come down to the beach and I'm looking left and right and I say, okay, there's one bear down there, and I'll walk back up. But it's so refreshing to see, how everyone's eyes light up and everything like that. So I do really enjoy seeing that. I also very much enjoy enhancing people's experiences here, sharing what little I know about bears, and I try to know as much as I can, but I just know a tiny, tiny bit. But I really do enjoy enhancing people's experiences and sharing what I know with them.
Yeah, that you saying you only know bears a little tiny bit. It's kind of an interesting thing for us because on the chat boards and on these chats we get referred to sometimes in the advertisements as bear experts, and I don't think either of us feels we're bear experts.
No,
Probably
I
the only bear
certainly-
experts
no.
out here are the bears themselves. But we're pretty good at knowing these bears and how things work around here, so we're really confident at that, but neither of us is a bear biologist, and that's why sometimes these really specific questions like, you know, the baby teeth question on Saturday, I don't know. I never learned that in geology class or the other classes.
You definitely keep us on our toes
Yeah.
for sure, and I have
And
a
it's
lot of
fun.
research I need to do this winter for sure.
So quickly, the question, a question about the mountain behind us. That is Mount Katahdin, and it looks particularly beautiful this time of the year with that fresh dusting of snow on it. And you were up it 2 weeks ago, right? Or a week ago?
Yeah,
Two.
2.5 weeks ago, I think it was. Yeah, 2 weeks ago. We'll stick with that.
So it looks really rugged from this side. He didn't go up this side. He went up the other side, around the corner there. It's a little less difficult. Still a difficult hike, though.
It's steep. It's about 4,700 feet of vertical that you do. So, and it's pretty consistently steep the whole way. But there's really no rock climbing that you have to do, at least to the actual summit. So you can just walk your way up. Maybe not a hike for people that are afraid of heights, because you do have to walk along some ridge lines and things like that. But no ropes are involved or anything. But it's a spectacular place. If anybody's looking for a really awesome mountain to climb here in Katmai, Katahdin is one of them. And if you get a really clear day where there's no clouds around, you can see every volcano in the park except for Nova Rupta. You can't see the vent at Nova Rupta because it's tucked behind some mountains. But you can see every other of the active volcanoes in the park.
Did you take some photos, or was it too cloudy?
No, I took some photos.
Maybe you
yeah.
can post a
so
photo.
I can put some photos
Share
on
that
our
with-
Flickr site.
Yep. So somebody saw a video of the otter family living underneath one of the buildings at the lodge, and how do we handle it when animals take residence under the buildings? Well, it depends on the animal. If an animal is an endangered species, which we don't have any endangered species in Katmai that would be living underneath our cabins, if it were an endangered species, we would treat it very differently. Around here, what we try to do is just prevent them from getting back under there again, and making sure that if they are nesting under there, that we don't trap babies inside. So it just depends on the animal. And so let's say it's just a squirrel going underneath there to cache some food, we'd probably try to fence it off so that the squirrel couldn't get in there. If it was an otter that had nested under there and had babies under there, we would allow them to wean the babies and leave the nest, and then we would try to keep them out of there, because otters really stink. You don't want
They
any
do.
animal living underneath your house, but weasels, that's, skunks are in the weasel family. So they really, really reek. Adorable beyond compare, but smell bad.
I think we had some under the visitor center
We
a few
did.
years ago, and it stunk
Oh,
so bad in
still
there.
stinks in there, I think.
People would come in, and I'd be standing behind the desk, and I was like, I hope these people don't think I'm the source of this smell, because it was actually really bad. So prevention is key. We'll just try to keep them out once they happen to depart.
And we do have squirrels that are trying to cache food in the ceiling of the visitor center. And one of the things that they're working on this fall out here is clearing the bat infestation out of our ranger station. So it happens here just like anywhere else. You get animals that move into your house. You need to try to get them out for your health and safety and comfort, and also in many cases for the animals, because our homes can actually end up hurting them. Like in the case of a bat, they can get caught on pieces of metal, screening, and things like that. So we try to get them out as soon as we know about it, before they get settled in and before there's a smell problem. Do we have the opportunity to visit bear biologists and other zoos, parks as their professional courtesy? A lot of people that are bear biologists come here and visit us. They know about Brooks Camp. They maybe read studies here, or their professor did studies here. So there are a lot of people that will come through here, introduce themselves. We don't have any kind of a professional trading program that goes on, other than with McNeil River. We have the ability to send some people over there to observe how McNeil River Bear Sanctuary runs their operation, and they've sent people here too. So very informal. It does happen though, and it's always very interesting to talk to other people. You think you're the only one with a certain problem, and you find out everybody that deals with large animals has a similar problem. We had a guy from Kruger National Park in South Africa come to visit us a gosh, maybe about 6 years ago in the fall, and wanted to see how we were dealing with our problems. And it was funny that many of the problems that we have with bears, they have with elephants there. That's their big sort of super intelligent animal that investigates everything and breaks everything it touches. So that was very interesting to talk to him. Our, bears here knock over signs and rub on buildings and damage them. In Africa, the elephants wander outside the park and destroy orchards or golf courses, or, they wreak havoc. But it's interesting. People managing wildlife the world over have many of the same problems. Our lives appear to be very transient. Is it difficult to maintain relationships?
Sometimes, for some people, yes, I'd say. And I don't want to get into too many details, but yeah, it can be. But you work it out with the right people. I'll say that.
It's on many levels it can be difficult because I'm permanent here. Mike is on a term appointment, so he's got 4 years here. I'm here until I get a job someplace else, or until I retire, probably. But we have a lot of people that come in that are just seasonals, and we know they're just going to be here for up to 6 months, and then they're going on, and we may not ever see them again. So there's a lot of turnover, and it can be difficult, but you do sort of adjust to it. And I think it's a lot easier keeping in touch these days because you've got the ability to send emails instantaneously. You can chat even faster, using instant messaging of some sort. I can't imagine what it would have been like 30 years ago out here, where the mail maybe came 1 day a week, and you might go 6 weeks between getting a letter from back home, or any, you might go weeks without getting mail if the weather was bad or they needed the plane for some other purpose. And so a lot easier for us today than before. But I think that also makes it sometimes difficult for people, because many of the people we hire are used to being in constant connection with everyone. Their entire world is connected with Facebook and Twitter and their smartphones, and they come up here and they have none of that at their disposal. So it can be disorienting.
But you do have the opportunity to meet very interesting people, many interesting people during your time in any national park, really. So you can make some very strong and long-lasting friendships and relationships as well, too. So, it's the difficult parts about it, but also some really great parts about it.
Yep. We now know people all over that you can stop in, and they're working in other parks, and you can say, hey, where's the best place to go? And they'll actually, they can provide a lot of insight to us, and also let you sleep on their floor sometimes. So it's nice. Why do we never see any moose?
Well, probably because there's just not that many, and they don't want to hang around the bears, I'd imagine. Mm-hmm. If you're a moose, you're going to be browsing on primarily willows in the summertime. And there's a whole lot of willows throughout the park, and I'm not going to go into detail on that, but I'll leave it at that, even though I'd like to.
We'll do that for another marathon chat. You can do like 12 hours straight on willows sometime.
So there's a lot of willows around the park, and there are other places to go browse those willows where there's relatively few bears. So I think for those two reasons, just not a lot of moose, and then that you can go other places and find food where you don't have to worry about brown bears is probably one of the main reasons why we don't happen to see a lot. But this is the time of the year to really be looking on the cams for moose, because I think we probably see more in the fall moving through the area than we see at other times during the year.
I've only seen in 10 years, 11 summers, 4 moose. One was in the spring, one was in the fall this time of the year, and 2 came by in the summer. 2 groups of them came by in the summer. And the ones that came by in the summer when the bears were here moved through, well, one cut right across by the Lower River platform and slogged out through the marsh, making very good time. Like, they realized they made a serious mistake and they wanted to get out of there. The other moose I saw in the summer was a cow with 2 calves with her, and she swam, I don't know how washed out it is back here, but she was probably a half a mile out and swam across the lake just to avoid coming through this area to continue on that direction. So they don't want to be here. They know that the bears are a threat to their survival or the survival of their young. So they're going to avoid this area when the bears are thick. But like you said, watch the cams. This is the time of the year where you might start to see them again. And, we've got those cams running for most of the daylight hours. So good chance that you might see something. I think they saw some last fall, but I can't remember.
And the park is flying surveys right now, aerial surveys, to get an estimate on the moose population. So if we get those results, and I'm not exactly sure when the results will be available, because they got to plug the numbers into their computer programs to extrapolate out the data. But once we get those numbers, we'll make that available to everybody.
Yep.
So you have a rough estimate of how many are in the park.
So the next question, we're up to 18 now, and then we've answered some that weren't even posed to us because we knew that they were asked before. But the 18th question is, how are the lives of the bears that live on the coast different from those here? It says at Katmai, and I'm assuming that means at Brooks Camp, because the Katmai, the coast is also part of Katmai. You know, there's far more coast in Alaska that's not in Katmai, but when we say the coast, we typically mean the coast of Katmai, which is off in this direction, about 50 miles. 60 miles. And so how are the lives different between them?
Well, you know, it's not significantly different. I mean, these are the same species of bears. They share a lot of the same experiences. They have the same social adaptations that help them to interact with one another around really high concentrations of food. In the springtime out on the coast, though, the bears are going to be feeding on different stuff. Here in the interior of the park, there's almost nothing to eat in the spring unless you are lucky enough to come across a moose calf or ago. And we have to apologize, everybody, because we kind of didn't notice that we went offline again. So
tell me if I'm in the shot here.
yeah. Okay, I can see your boot, just the tip of your, yep, I can see
Okay,
that.
so you can zoom out then and
Okay.
then zoom back in. We're not sure exactly where we cut off. It may have been power issues again. Not really sure. You know, once again we're shutting down everything, and there are people flipping circuits and shutting off cabins and locations. So they may have inadvertently killed our power again briefly, and apologize that we talked for evidently 5 to 10 minutes, not realizing we were offline. We don't have a blinking red light on this side of the camera to let us know if we're live or not. I know what the last question was, so I'll go ahead and answer that one. The last question we talked about was whether or not we would consider taking one of Otis's casts of his paw prints and selling them. And if we had a really good one, I would not be opposed to doing that. But the difficulty we have here is that the large males like Otis don't usually come down and walk along the beach here or walk in places where they leave tracks. And even if they did walk on the beach, the tracks here are not great because the quality of this material, you can see it's pretty coarse. It's ground up pumice from the Novarupta eruption, and it doesn't take a track very well. Now, right in front of me is a hind track of a small bear, because my hand is bigger than that. And that's really all I'm seeing down here, are some smallish tracks, and then I see some human tracks that have busted up some, and it's just a heavily used area, and then it's not very good for leaving footprints. And so if Otis were to ever show up someplace, or any of the other large bears show up someplace where we could get a good footprint of it, or a good cast of its footprint, we would certainly take the cast. Whether or not people would be interested in buying it is another matter. If you're interested in casts like that, I know that there are places in Alaska that sell tracks online, and I know at least 2 of them where the bears came from Alaska, or from Katmai. They were had their feet cast directly during the cleanup from the Exxon Valdez spill. And so if you do an internet search for brown bear footprint tracks in or casts in Alaska, you should come up with them, and they'll probably say that they were from Katmai. So did we get to the question on volunteerism? Was that on the, do we know where we got cut off?
No, I'm not sure. The comments here were just a little slow to load, so let me see if I can bring that up.
Well, instead of dead air, while we were maybe offline, maybe online, we were talking about volunteer opportunities. And Katmai is sort of limited in its volunteer opportunities because we don't have housing for people to actually show up here and volunteer. And so we typically have very few chances for people to do that. And when we do have them, we post them at volunteer.gov/gov. And typically those would be posted in January or so. The other place where we post them would be the Student Conservation Association website, and that is thesca.org. And those would be posted typically in November if we have opportunities. Other parks have the similar problem where they don't have enough housing for their employees, much less volunteers, but they have other options, like you can stay in the local community, or they might say, you can stay in our campground, just bring your motorhome or your trailer. But we don't have roads out to here, so that removes that option for us. I also suggested that you might look at volunteer.gov and find that there's a volunteer opportunity much closer to home that you might be interested in, because all of the government agencies will put their volunteer opportunities there. And then Mike had a great reminder that just by watching these cams and snapping photos, you actually are volunteering and helping us out. It's a thing that we call citizen science, and Park Services would really like to do more of that, and we hope that in coming years with the webcams, we might have a formalized program where you snap photos at certain times, help us count bears, identify species that we see. Did we find out where we got cut off?
No, but it did seem like people had heard us talk about, let's see, there was something, they did hear about the live chat on Wednesday, and I can't remember where in the process we were.
Well, then we probably talked about volunteers, so probably just duplicated. So yeah, live chat Wednesday. We may take a break of a few weeks and would intend to for sure come back at the end of October for another one. And it's possible that we may miss you guys all so much that we'll try to pull one together before then. But for sure the end of the month, and definitely, without a doubt, on Wednesday. But we did never figure out the time, did we? I bet. We're thinking 2 o'clock, the usual time. So I guess we'll go ahead and say goodbye for now. We've got to go catch our flight, pack up the last few things, and we will see you all on Wednesday, this time from King Salmon.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy your time.